Hi, good evening. Welcome. We're going to get started. I'm Kyle Dekoyan. I'm the executive director of the Poetry Project, and it's really lovely and kind of dreamy to be gathered with you tonight. And it feels like the right tone for a reading with Hannah Black and Jackie Wang, both of whom we feel very grateful toward. Thank you to Hannah and Jackie for reading. Thank you to everybody for being here. Thank you to the Poetry Project staff and volunteers, Laura, Will, Becca, and Matt for bringing all of this together. Just a few notes before this event. There are books for sale at the door. Please feel free to purchase those now or during the readings. And we do also have a limited building capacity still, so if you need to get inside to use the restroom, we just ask that you check in first with a staff attendant at the book table. And then once the reading is over, while we do need to process out of the churchyard, you are welcome to linger and hang out in the plaza in front of the church on 10th Street. Throughout the pandemic, we've been starting our events with a sort of constellated land acknowledgement. And now that we're here in this seemingly singular geographic space, it's a very complex space. And it feels important, especially for the work we'll be listening to tonight, to begin to name and acknowledge some of that complexity. St. Mark's Church is the oldest site of continuous institutional religious worship in this place we recognize as New York City. And so not only is our venue built upon unceded indigenous lands, specifically the territory of the Lenape people, this place is very specifically, psychically, and materially implicated in many generations in forms of colonial violence and enslavement. We're listening right now on the graves of many of the earliest congregants of this church and settlers of this city. And as we gather here, we bear that in mind, both the responsibilities and limitations of language toward accountability and repair. So thank you for your openness and presence tonight, and I'm going to turn to introducing Hannah Black, who will read first, and then after Hannah's reading, I'll come back to introduce Jackie Wang. Hannah Black is a writer, artist, and mentor in this year's Emerge Surface B Fellowship Program at the Poetry Project, working with Gabrielle Octavia Rucker. She's the author of 2 books, Dark Pool Party and Life with Juliana Huxtable. She's also written for a number of publications, including Art Forum, Book Forum, and The New Inquiry. Her self-scripted performance works include Or Life Or, presented at MoMA PS1 with Soraya Lutangu and Ebba Franzen-Waldtor, and Penumbra, presented at Performance Space with Juliana Huxtable. Recent exhibitions include Ruin Rien at Arcadia Misa and Didi Eberhard Phantom at Kunstverein Braunschweig. Reading and listening to Hannah Black's work, I find I'm often asking who is thinking and speaking and toward whom and under what conditions. Often conditions of capital, race, and gender, though these forces or threads are also not neatly separable. And in the way they mutually form, inflect, complicate one another, something sort of formally analogous seems to move through the consciousness or shifting consciousnesses of the work. From City Built at Night, quote, "To say it's myself that I'm trying to escape only briefly defers the question of who made me want to." And from Long-Term Effects, "Can't I'm yours be redeemed from these histories of ownership? Can't yours mean I don't own myself, I refuse ownership?" At every sentence level, there's this incredibly complex and also intuitive recognition of the different interdependencies, longing, fear, harm, obligation, between character, speaker, writer, reader, subject. I conceptualize it as a kind of formally collectivist writing strategy, but maybe the less wonky thing to say is that I just experience Hannah's work as a reflection of someone deeply sensitive and attentive to relation. And in some way that exceeds ego and self, while still embracing all of the vulnerabilities and possibilities and particularities of self. It's welcoming you. I think it's critical work and also generous and loving work and also very honest work. And it's a great pleasure to welcome Hannah Black to the Poetry Project.
Oh, are you gonna? Thank you so much. Okay. Thanks. Is this on? No. That's fine. Oh, now it's on. Remember social distancing? Retro. I'm going to start with the thing I always do. So, I don't know why I have the impression that someone would remember it. There's no reason. But I apologize if you do and you're bored by it. And then I'm going to read. So this is an old thing. I'm going to begin with this old thing. And then I'm going to, which I know by heart, because that's fun. And then I'm going to read from my phone from a new thing. Okay. I see volcanoes in my dreams more often these days. They leak a rainbow lava from a secret center as if at the very middle of the earth there were a gay bar. In my dream, I know that we are all gone. Our cities are gone. Our art is gone. Our language and machines are gone. Gone is the stepfather sewing a button back onto his Tuesday-Thursday uniform while the radio plays. Gone is the flat lower back of the most beloved woman at the Adult Literacy Centre, with the ridge of her spine snaking through it as she twists her back, neck and head to look at the sudden hard rain, bringing the scent of wet stone through the half-open window. Gone are the ashy knuckles of the great-grandmother smiling, unashamed of lost teeth, and reaching up to the window of the Jeep with a piece of fruit in her hand for the journey. But there are still animals clinging to life, and we have not yet become Venus, the planet of love, 480 degrees Celsius at the surface and hostile to all recognizable forms of life. In the volcano dream, at the ends of the earth, I bend impossibly close to the flowing furnace of the rainbow lava, and I perceive, with a wild feeling of love, loss, longing, luck in my chest, the unmistakable swirl of DNA. But the truth is that the image of your face cancels out for me the idea of the end of the world, like you're dancing on a table in a 90s gay bar decked out in rainbow flags at the center of the earth, and there's a girl screaming, "You know it!" so loud that you can hear her over the 90s music, and all of this is oozing upward as molten rock. I know I get kind of hallmark sometimes when I'm in the mood to be pleased. When I'm in the mood to be pleased by an abstract idea of the human, or the human inhuman humans. But would you believe it, for a second after I heard we were all going to die, it was your face that filled my mind's eye, and all the sticky complications, all the jealousies and resentments, all the professional and personal, seemed like a rebuke to the entropy of everything. That's that one. Thank you so much. This is I wrote a novella based on it's the first 6 months of 2020. Everyone's doing their 2020 art now, but it's fine. It's like 1968. We'll have nothing else to talk about forever, and that's just how life is. Not that much happens. I don't know, maybe not. It's a crazy time. But anyway, that's what I've been doing. At some point, I realized that no one wanted to. There was a kind of meme on social media that people were saying a lot on social media that they did not in any way want to read any kind of fictional representation or watch any kind of fictional representation of 2020. I was like, fuck, that's bad for me. So then I added there's like an alien invasion element to the plot. Otherwise it's pretty like close to reality or whatever. And everyone's named after an animal, but that's just because I'm bad at names. But you can imagine them as also being the animal in the style of BoJack Horseman if you want as well. It's called Tuesday or September or the End, and I'm going to read some from the January chapters, the 6 chapters, January through June. I'm going to read from January and February and June. We'll see how it goes. It was only January 2020, and already Bird was sick of hearing about the aliens. She was forced to ingest the news continuously because all the TVs at work were set to CNN. No one was born wanting to pay $500 to get their hair cut and coloured amid the blaring, toony faces of newscasters in a stream of horror images. Although she was pleased by the generous tips, much improved from her last place of work, it seemed to Bird that her customers' choice of salon indicated that something had gone wrong in their lives. Technically, nothing had gone wrong in their lives. They had a lot of money. All that had gone wrong in their lives had also gone wrong in the life of the world. Bird could do everything, but she specialized in color. She could match any skin tone to its ideal hair shade on sight. She had a gift. It was fun, a trip to change lives daily with Olaplex and bleach. She believed that her eye had been trained through generations of heavy chromatic meaning, para-originating in the Caribbean, where her parents were born, via London, where she was born, to New York City, where she now lived. Best and worst of all, through her work, she was able to perceive movements in the general mood. Since the alien object had appeared in early January, just days after America tried to provoke war with Iran, customers couldn't talk about anything else. The discovery had been made on Jones Beach, so close. A classics professor who insisted on a kind of feathery 90s cut, 90s again, told Bird that the object resembled the oak rods used in the ceremonial prophecies at the ancient Temple of Fortuna, while Bird dyed a green ombre into her hair. Sensing Bird's lack of interest, the professor asked if she thought the whole aliens thing was a hoax. Bird didn't think it was a hoax, she just didn't think it was interesting. We had made so little progress as a species in communicating with whales or apes or each other. Humans had underdeveloped the abilities that would have made the moment of alien contact special. Sadly, as usual, there was nothing to get excited about. Cleaning up after hours, Bird and her colleagues switched to music videos. The screens were permanently set to the hyper-realistic glaze they put on sportscasts, so everything looked like a panic attack, jumpy, too vivid, flat. Clearly, cinema was in the process of being not just technologically but spiritually murdered by the increasingly cinematic quality of everyday life. There was an atmosphere of saturated narrative repetition in the air that felt like simulation or psychosis. But when you put feelings aside for a second, it was probably something much more drab, like the slow death of a form of society. The news reported over and over that every living American was enraptured by the alien object. There were crowds at Jones Beach, and the city had a hectic, anticipatory air, crammed with tourists of all kinds, many who had evidently never been to New York before. Bird felt alone in not caring. She was tired of talking about aliens. She wanted to talk about her feelings. But her boyfriend Dog was among the enraptured many. As a social democrat, he sought to embrace popular feeling. He had gone down to Jones Beach claiming simple curiosity, but came back with his mind made up. Just looking at the object had made him believe. Its substance had a strange resonance. It really did look like oak, like the professor had said, but seemed to have been produced by technological methods. A customer said she thought it was alive but sleeping, said Bird. Dog's face lit up. Do you think so? I don't know. You can never talk anyone out of blonde, but I don't think she suits any type of it. Bird! Bird was stubborn and did not want to give herself an interesting encounter with the alien material. She would prefer to continue to be wrong, which did not require her to turn to face her wrongness. So, while the world was raving about and obsessed with the alien object, in Bird and Dog's apartment it was equal parts alien and mundane. It was a rod of unknown material with a pattern on its surface, and the truth was, nothing else was yet known. Every few hours or days or whatever, Dog raised his head from the glowing window of his phone. Every few hours or days or whatever, Dog raised his head from the glowing window of his phone. Not like me. The world was the window and hidden inside his body, and his body was lost outside the world. Inside the screen, beyond the window that was also the world was on fire. What did he think about as he allowed catastrophe to scroll through him? A pad with notes in his handwriting read, "Forget it," written compulsively maybe 200 times. And he really had forgotten writing all that. When the subconscious said jump, then the mind that knew its own name asked how high. Metonymic sensations of Bird's presence ran a ladder up the vertiginous edges of the feeling of a broken world. The smell of candy-flavored jewels and rose oil, local talk radio mixed in with the waterfall sound of the shower. Soon she would emerge wet and shining to tell him something new. Without this tether to reality, who knows what could have happened. The weather stayed bearable, not cold enough. It was freaky, everyone said. 4 days a week, Dog went to a call center where he sat for 8 to 10 hours and listened to strangers cry and rage about their health insurance. At first, the job had been weirdly energizing. The extraordinary radiance of the suffering of strangers had electrified him. Now it was numbing and aggravating at the same time. He believed that it was possible for a person to waste their life, and this bothered him. This conservationist stance on life dried out his personality a little and focused him inward, at least more than he would have liked if he could have chosen himself from a menu. As Dog would later explain to the aliens to justify how it was possible that he had spent so much of the life he believed he could waste making people cry on the phone. Once a month, the call center deposited money in his bank account. A lot of things could have happened, a lot of forms of social organization, but at this point in history, January 2020, world of dwindling animals, the wage and its dread exterior had achieved insane predominance as an organizing principle. Human life at that point was like a fucked up car. Some people who understood how it worked could drive it a certain distance, but it would eventually have to be taken to the scrapyard and recycled into something more bearable. As a result of his call center job, Dog had become passionately interested in the electoral campaign of Moly salamanders. The elderly senator had taken advantage of a power vacuum opened up by the incredible incompetence and laziness of the Democratic Party to attempt to bring universal health care to the USA. While centrist Democrats were still scrambling to regain ground they had lost either by having shit for brains or through innate malevolence, Dog was not sure which. Moly's campaign had gone from strength to strength, partly thanks to enthusiastic volunteers like Dog. Since the Jones Beach incident, Moly's pragmatic, cautiously optimistic stance on aliens had taken the country by storm, propelling him to the head of a wide field of candidates for the Democratic nomination. This included decrepit shark, raddled pony, soulless rat, each candidate apparently vying for who could be the least charismatic. What they had done to defend themselves against having to provide universal health care, make it sound stupid and complicated, they could not do for the arrival of aliens. The aliens were popular across the entire political spectrum because everyone was sick of every person, animal, and thing on Earth. Bird alone continued to be aggressively uninterested in the aliens. She might perhaps have lifted an eyebrow at an alien declaration of war, but then she would have had to die embarrassed. In any case, the alien object remained mute, still awaiting interpretation. That was January. Thank you so much for listening. Okay, this is February, a chapter called The Death of Social Democracy. We're skipping around. There was more of January, I swear. They had the same conversation. How are you all? Okay, is everyone fine? Okay, sorry. They had the same conversation all the time. Bird said that nothing originated in mainstream politics, which was just a clearinghouse for happenstance. By pretending that an election was a revolutionary grassroots movement, the Moly Salamanders campaign would end up with neither an election victory nor a movement. If they wanted a revolution, they would have to make a revolution. Anything else was the theatrics of representation, and meanwhile, a world died of itself. Dog said that her arguments were too purist and not based on actual mass politics. They did not take into account that the real behavior and beliefs of ordinary people who did not want the radical overturning of the world. You had to begin where people were in order to activate their sense of themselves as collective authors of their lives. That was political education. Weren't the Christian eschatologists who heavily influenced American politics, Bird wondered, proof that the radical overturning of the world was in fact popular? Dog said that there was always another more substantial reason hiding under the guise of religion. Searching for an example and not finding a better one, he cited early European missionary zeal in Africa. They loved God as a pretext for mass murder. This was the current condition of spiritual life. Bird said that he always underestimated belief because of his narrow view of politics. She said that social revolution required faith in the infinite possibility that simmers in the movement of chance. Then it required a God, said Dog, and therefore mass murder given the current conditions. A God, said Bird, is just a concept that teaches a daily life. It's like how the possibility of social transformation is kept alive by everyday practices such as crime and love of friends, practices that seem minute in comparison to the scale of the problem, death, capitalism, etc., but reveal that the problem is unfolding in all its spectacular beauty/terror at the animal scale of a day. She stated that an abolitionist who didn't believe in abolition within their lifetime was a reformist. She reminded Dog that they were living in a suicidal society in which a majority of people were surveilled, indebted, drugged and traumatized, that life itself had been dishonored. Using information drawn from their intimate relationship, Dog suggested that she was speaking from her emotional wounds. He expressed his opinion that these wounds were not the place to generate the ethos of a social movement, because social movements by their nature had to move beyond the immediacy of pain and affirm that life was worth living. She had herself admitted that their terrain was everyday life. They wanted their difference from each other. Dog wanted Bird to be a hopeless insurrectionist so that he could feel his own secret fidelity to sudden transformation still alive under layers of pragmatism and policy. Bird wanted Dog to believe in incremental progress in the abattoir of capitalism so that her inner sense of abyss could acquire walls and a floor. Bird searched in Dog for ground, and Dog searched in Bird for the lightness of fire. Their difference was binding and animated their love, which was sometimes mundane, with the five-fingered chords of world history. Now we're going to skip forward to June. A lot has happened. And also nothing has happened. I don't know. That's what writing is like. Okay. June is called Or the End. Without the aliens, history could have unfolded different. And then we're done. Sorry. Thank you for your pet. You can moderate your stamina. Without the aliens, history could have unfolded differently. With material and defensive military support from the alien base in Cuba, the riots grew to world-changing proportions. Love of aliens melted fascist sympathies, eroding the social base of reaction. For Bird, the riots became a daily practice. She was reunited with the city and her friends. She had returned to New York during a local phase of the affirmation of life. A period of total introversion had flowered instantly into maximum social activity, the maximum social activity, revolution. For Bird, hungry for and uncertain of others, it was medicinal and magical. Every day she saw 100 new signs that no world was too good to be destroyed and renewed by the people it was made up of. Every day she saw 1,000 new signs that a world that thought itself too good to be destroyed and renewed was bound to death and the secularization of death. Everything had become subject to death and therefore alive. So the machines and networks were as alive as ideas were, and the ghosts of the past, if you believed in them. All beliefs were alive now. That is to say, it was all dying. The cities were dying, the coral reef, the restaurant industry, the ice sheets, the gender regime. Democracy was dying, which was fine because it had never really been born. But people who really had been born were also dying, away from those who could help them die. So there was a spiritual restlessness always in the air. In this phase of maximum life, this shadow hung over everything. This death was not a judgment out of which a religion and therefore a routine could have been made. It was just a fact always disappearing around the corner of whatever undying thing was right in front of her. It was what had happened because the living world had been brutalized and abstracted. Life/death in the form of a virus rebelled against its objectification as value. In a system that generated its force from rebellion, that had never meant much before. But now the steady presence of the aliens gave rebellion a living body and outer skin. The riots made the world new, and sadness is always old. So in that brand new summer, in the liquid return of feeling, Bird forgot to dwell on her losses. The losses themselves were healed by the novelty of being with others. And not only that, but seeing police cars burn. And not only that, her soul rushed towards the riot. She had no opinion about her fate. The wheel of fortune span wildly. The future was infinitely open. Precincts burned in all 5 boroughs. Cops quit in their hundreds, and some immediately went down to one of the people's encampments that sprung up around the city to confess their sins and ask for the people's forgiveness. Workers at first Trader Joe's, then all the major grocery store chains refused to take payment for goods. The commodity form is non-consensual, read a banner draped over the Whole Foods on East Houston. At citywide #MeToo meetings, workers of all kinds gathered to describe the ways they had been harmed, humiliated, and degraded by their bosses. Wait, I have to fix the state governor, he has a fun name, but I think I forgot to put it in the first mention of him. The state governor cut off supply chains to the city, hoping to starve the riot. His children publicly denounced him, but it wasn't even necessary. A group of revolutionary truckers ignored the order and drove deliveries of food and medicine through checkpoints at full speed. Supplies flowed in anyway from the alien headquarters in Cuba via the port, which was controlled by the riot. Bird did not know where Dog was, and she did not try to find out. He was living in his brother's basement in Washington Heights. Dog did not know that Bird had come back to New York. They thought of each other in their separate places. They did not try to contact each other. One night, chance almost brought them together in front of a looted Apple store, but Dog left to watch Trump Tower burn 5 minutes before Bird arrived. Later, neither regretted how long it had taken them to run into each other. Everyone understood at this point that chance was the collective authorship of destiny, dressed in the drab clothes that the pre-revolutionary era had forced it to wear. Skirmishes continued throughout the city, led by a hardcore NYPD contingent who would not give up even in the face of the riots' courage, alien support, and vastly superior numbers. By mid-June, everyone had grown expert in barricades, and even after the police retreated to Staten Island, they kept inland stretches of barricade intact. These remainders resembled public sculptures whose form fluctuated daily as people took parts away and added others. It became customary to refer to the network of friends and associates who held barricades according to a rotating, ever-evolving schedule as the People's Army. It was a joke because military discipline was absent. There were no rules, though behavior was endlessly discussed. There were no uniforms, though you could detect unspoken dress codes, and no fixed leaders, though some were listened to more than others. The term army nevertheless caused consternation in the media. Infographics and videos were shared on Instagram explaining that the movement was non-hierarchical and operated according to discussion and consent. But perhaps the unfortunate term was why the governor finally colluded with the president in allowing the National Guard to enter the city. In scenes broadcast internationally over and over for months after, a National Guard unit met with a contingent of protesters on the George Washington Bridge, and there they kneeled with the people. They burned the bridge immediately after as a precaution against further invasion. This event appeared immediately in that night's revolutionary chants as shamefully simple as love songs, symbolizing a complete break with the past. What would be done with those who clung to this abolished past? Without universal law, each would follow their own fate. In some neighborhoods they held trials, and in others there were passionate murders. The problem of revolutionary tyranny melted into the discovery of each other. It was unreal. It was a dream. A public discussion on the NYPD budget outside City Hall began what no one knew then would be a 9-month public debate about what the form of the new city commune would be. At first an argument, then self-consciously evoking a new democratic form, then becoming the complicated reality of this image. The discussion spanned many subjects and continued to be referred to as City Hall. Ordinary business was dealt with. All prisoners were released. Medical debt was cancelled. Rent was abolished, and billions of dollars of public money was given to mutual aid groups around the city. These groups had begun to organize themselves into neighborhood zones with rotating representatives of City Hall. It was decided that time had to be made for general and spiritual questions. This decision itself took 2 full days, and for some reason no one could later remember, most of this time was spent arguing about if individual freedom had to mean chaos and or isolation. Some people argued that the association was a negative fantasy born from the pain of childhood. Others maintained that it was the concept of the individual that was at fault. But did this link, whatever it was, represent a practical hard limit on freedom, or did it demand a change in desire? Although no final conclusions could be drawn, the discussion helped a lot of people think through their attachment to the war machine and the police. It was as if everyone there had begun a relationship with each other. Inevitably, there would be both pleasure and pain, but in the early days, in the thrill of victory, it was easier to focus on pleasure. Across all forms, music, memes, etc., artists strove to express the weird feeling of being broken open into a new collective life. In the individual body, the revolution felt as if the hands and feet had snapped off at the ends of the arms and legs, and the head too had hinged perfectly and cleanly from the neck, and it turned out the body was just brimming with a universal light that now radiated outwards. As if exhausted by something like sex, you both could and could not walk around like that, because so sincerely focused on an inner satisfaction/longing. Almost done. Thank you so much. There was the long Monday when a delegation from the decommissioning team at Indian Point, the nuclear power station just north of the city, arrived to share some urgent concerns. That day, though full of logistical and practical questions, was strangely emotional. Everyone felt moved and scared by the absolute reality of their situation. There was momentary harmony within the Congress. It was decided amid sentimental speeches that the budget and oversight for the decommissioning process would be offered to the Indigenous Congress that was happening simultaneously on Long Island. The break in constant argument was short. Liberal holdouts among the representatives from the mutual aid zones of Park Slope and the Upper West Side felt that the handover was irresponsible and premature, and they made their feelings clear. The Upper West Side representatives took the humiliating step of officially declaring their loyalty to the state governor, Whatever, too late for the fun name now, whatever. But according to popular belief, he had crossed the border into Canada, so it didn't matter. It only emphasized the obvious fact that the bourgeois neighborhoods were weak links in terms of defending the city. The more advanced of the mutual aid zones gave their liberals non-representative, honorary or harmless positions such as grocery coordination or community exercise, and, thus placated, most of them stayed more or less loyal to the revolution. Some of the wealthiest in the city were strangely reluctant to leave, considering they had many places to go, but the helipads of Manhattan were often frequented by ageless vampires, sneaking a last goodbye glimpse of the skyline, a surreal image of labor that they mistook for the victory of their greed. Bird saw Dog in the crowd outside City Hall. His face struck her like the ongoing shock of being able to read. You know how that shock can inspire a kind of commitment if you have been with me this long. Recognizing him, her body acknowledged that experience accumulated in it. Experience had not, in fact, leaked away through the many holes they had made in their love. Half obliterated by plague, then resurrected by riot, Bird moved in the direction of her love as the people declared the New York Commune from the steps of City Hall. That's the end. Thank you so much. Sorry.
Thank you, Hannah. It's sort of disorienting and inspiring to listen to that June passage as a distant fiction and to be in a very different June. I'm going to introduce Jackie Wang now, and I have a feeling that either during my introduction or at the beginning of Jackie's reading, we're going to have another announcement from the church bells. But it'll be the last church bell. Jackie Wang is a scholar, abolitionist, poet, multimedia artist, and recently assistant professor of culture and media studies at the New School's Eugene Lang College, and soon to be teaching at USC. She's the author of Carceral Capitalism, a book on the racial, economic, political, legal, and technological dimensions of the U.S. carceral state. Her creative work includes the poetry collection, The Sunflower Cast a Spell to Save Us from the Void, just out from Nightboat, and the forthcoming experimental essay collection, Alien Daughters Walk into the Sun, forthcoming from Semiotext. I still hear many astonished and grateful responses to a masterclass Jackie led a few years ago at the Poetry Project on abolitionist poetics and the practice of dreaming. And I think what continues to be so radiant about that class, and what's also evident in this new book, is the space of importance she opens for dreaming as vitalizing and liberatory, and for poetics as a site of transport and question. Sylvia Wynter writes that language is the way that we will carry ourselves out of these problems we have. And I think part of what Jackie's work does is imagine what could be underneath or outside of language as we experience it conventionally, so that we can start to undo all of these structures that have become so insidiously normal. The work is full of pleasure and at the same time takes pleasure seriously, or commits attention and intelligence to what surprises and confounds us, what might not have immediately evident logic. What is this rattling, she asks, in the vernacular of our bodies? I sent for someone to come get me, but where are they? Where have they gone? Where am I supposed to go if I am not got? I feel like Jackie's work puts my sense of possibility through a colander and filters out all of this liquid muck of daily obligation and expectation. And I'm very grateful now to welcome her to the Poetry Project.
I'm short, so I always have to adjust the mic before I read. Thank you so much, Kyle, for that really generous and thoughtful introduction. It's really overwhelming to be here. This is my first event in 3D since the pandemic, so it's so wonderful to see so many familiar faces, and it's really overwhelming for me since I was supposed to move to New York City last summer, and then my life very recently took a detour, so I'm meeting a lot of my students who I've had throughout the last year at the new school, so it's really great. And I wanted to thank Jack, Zoe, Olivia, and Rob for coming tonight. The bells. Just perfectly timed. And I also wanted to thank Hannah, my dear friend. Where did Hannah go? I don't have my glasses on, but here they're in the back. And thank you, Kyle and Laura, as well. So I'm going to be reading a number of poems from my collection, The Sunflower Cast a Spell to Save Us from the Void. Wow, that was perfectly timed. I feel like I'm in church. I'm like reciting a prayer. Thank you, bells. And then I have some pandemic dreams, transcriptions of dreams that I'll read after these poems. So this first poem is titled Preliminary Notes on the Marxist White Boy Recognition System. I feel like there are resonances with Hannah's reading as well. It is New York, and I have some articles coming out in a student newspaper run by Marxist boys who believe they are the legatees of the Frankfurt School. Their detractors think their analysis is dated and that they don't understand the nature of value under late capitalism. The factious leftist publishers all like me. I can't understand why. I give them my words. We celebrate the release of Death Notes 3 at the editor's apartment, but a fight breaks out between the autonomists who are of the Italian tradition and those affiliated with French ultra-leftists such as Tikkun. Some insults are hurled about Negri. The communizationists cavil at his advocacy of the universal wage. Another makes a countervailing remark about the stupidity of the theory of the jeune fille. All I can think about is escaping through drugs. Or, I hope Kant shows up. Kant comes, so drugs are unnecessary. In front of Kant, I tried to fake knowing, and he says, it's okay to not know everything. I say, what do you know better than anyone else? He replies, red sea turtles. I expected him to say Emily Dickinson or Walt Whitman or pragmatist philosophy, but red sea turtles is an opening. I point to my necklace, a red turtle. I don't know if it's a sea turtle, but my ex-girlfriend did buy it at the aquarium. The head falls off my necklace. It makes my rosy spirit umber with sadness. It's okay, I tell Kant, as though he is actually invested in the fate of the turtle on my necklace. Now it just looks like it has retreated into its shell. Kant asks me what subject I know better than anyone else. I shrug and say I don't know anything. So this next poem is titled Waiting for Girdle. First of all, nobody will survive money. Of course I understand this poem, and by that I mean I understand what it means to be a disappeared writer who wakes to tinnitus like all my life is this morning tinnitus, because the soundtrack to my life is exhaustion, whereas those subalpine, those sibylline, those sumptuous buttes of the celestial order have got a kinder oral factory, atmosphere symphony factory to make the day leap with a plangent start. A dream comes to me and I am in a classroom being tested. No one is present to administer the test. I must be here to test myself. We all know how that will go. What makes this dream interesting is that I'm waiting for someone I don't know, a stranger, and then I'm outside in the desert, and it's cold, it's a vacant rodeo, and I'm still waiting. Approach already. Who said, is this woman of color ontology, this waiting? Debbie knows and loves the poem of waiting and all the great poems of waiting. Tennyson's Come Into the Garden, Maud, which may or may not be a poem of waiting, though we did have to wait to look it up on the computer. Between remembrance and reenactment, there is waiting. But I truly believe we're not waiting to become our better selves, that we're already so great as it is. We are aureoled beings doing our being thing. It's not easy being alive. This I know. But sometimes the moon is such that you just kind of slide into the glory hole that is your life. The brave, freewheeling musicality of existence. This next poem is titled Death as a Survival Technique. The world is warming, and we humans are to blame. In the future, the world will only hold one person. Therefore, everyone else must die. It is for this reason that I find myself in a kind of natural Hunger Games caused by global warming. Everyone knows there can only be one survivor, and the people are in a murderous frenzy. Though I have no intention to kill anyone, I still have to persuade everyone not to kill me. I have to get them to empathize with me, but I don't plead. Sometimes I hide by lying prone atop a pole, pretending to be dead. By making myself visible, I remove the anxiety of being found. My fake death becomes an orchestration that involves as many people as Tupac's pseudo-death. In the dream, I hear Maxine eulogize me. He knows I'm not dead, but to stop people from killing me, he must convince them that I really am. Feigning death makes me privy to how I will be remembered. I think it's sad that people are not alive to experience their funerals, because it's the most love they'll ever get. Maxine eulogizes people in a way that only a queer who has lived through the AIDS crisis can. But I'm not dead. Everyone but me knows how to survive the typhoon caused by rising global temperatures. The threat of death makes me calm. On the shore, there is a crumbling beach house. Everything is crumbling as we wait for intermittent waves to hit. Where in this house will I find air to breathe? The walls won't hold. The safety I feel in this structure is false. I am crouched in a corner waiting to die until Elijah comes and asks me to participate in a fashion show to lighten the apocalyptic mood. Elijah takes me to a warehouse, dresses me in skimpy clothes, and pushes me out onto the stage. Ashamed of my body, I try to cover myself with my hands and arms. From the audience, he yells to show more belly. And then to celebrate my performance, he takes me into an empty, crumbling house to play me a song on the piano while the house fills with water. Imminent apocalyptic obliteration has brought out everyone's repressed desires. All over the shore, people are having BDSM sex in the ruins. Where did all these leather belts come from, I think? I see my friend all tied up, blissed out. It is a way to prepare for death. The sadists believe they will be the ones who will survive. The masochists embrace their non-sovereignty in the situation. Freakish weather makes us all non-sovereign. In this sense, the sadists will be punished for their hubris, their belief that through sheer muscular will they can beat Mother Nature. The story becomes an epic showdown between sadists and masochists. But I know that the situation calls for total passivity. Maybe that doesn't make sense. Maybe it's a pact with the gods. The secret is to not try. In giving yourself over to the inevitability of death, nothing can hurt you. Nature no longer wants to kill you. You have put yourself at the center of the battle of cosmic forces and lowered your sword. Because you are willing to die, you will be spared. But, I'm sad that all my friends will die, even though the situation has turned them against me. Why must only one survive this environmental catastrophe? To submit, to take the passive road to heaven. Survival of the fittest? No. Survival of the best at playing dead. All right, so this is the last poem from the Sunflower Dream book. And I'm going to dedicate this to Rob and our discussions in class about decreation. We had Chris Kraus come to our class, and she was talking about how everyone reads I Love Dick as a neoliberal narrative of self-empowerment and, I don't know, like neoliberal feminism. And she was talking about how she was interested in deconstructing the self, and through Simone Weil, she was interested in decreation. All dream, all seem, this ribbon, the churned up pink revolt, when you are free to receive perfectly, unselfishly, the gift of decreation. Outlaw jouissance takes no substitute, returns to your door just to return, to stay, to touch, or otherwise connect. Our fault line crypt finds the perfect parchment to catalog descent, to become destructed angels, and as destructed, open to all activities against the law and financial institutions. All right, so the last series of, I don't know if they're poems, they're transcriptions of pandemic dreams, mostly about death. So these are excerpts from Death Fugue, a pandemic dream sequence. Dream of processing M's corpse in a bicycle shop. She was in a translucent plastic bag on top of a row of bicycles for weeks, slowly decomposing. Her head was decapitated. Her corpse was waterlogged after being submerged in the river for so long. There was blood everywhere. Her guts were spilling out. Told myself, well, she would have loved this. She was obsessed with gore. This is her revenge on the world. The bike shop became an Asian market run by an old Chinese woman. Her lackey was an old man who looked like the Patrick Star character from SpongeBob SquarePants, except his intestines were on the outside of his body. In the dream, the closer you are to death, the more your organs are visible through your skin, which becomes increasingly translucent with age. Her mom was micromanaging the processing of the corpse. The corpse kept changing every time we went to work on it. It was a process that took many days. At one point, her head was a melted pile of bloody pulp, but you could still make out the features of her face. The eyes, someone said. I got very upset and left to read some old journal entries in a room where some of my high school friends were waiting in dim lights. I asked about her life after me. I had taken little bits of her flesh and put them in some gruel to eat. Everyone thought it was disgusting. I insisted I made the same food with her dead skin while she was alive. In fact, it was the same bowl of bottomless gruel that I had kept going for years. Now it contained bits of flesh from the alive period and the dead period. After days of processing the corpse, it was finally clean and looked like Play-Doh. Dreamed I was at the memorial again, but this time it was held in a glass conservatory. Everyone was competing with each other to prove they knew her best. We were all rewriting her life, seeking her ghost's approval, while her ghost wandered naked among the crowd. She no longer cared about me and laid down next to her last girlfriend, who was also reclining naked. At her mom's house, I continued to try to capture her in words, but couldn't. I forgot about my flight. My little brother was with me. We rushed to the airport. I had forgotten how to scan the boarding pass with my phone. Dreamed that her mom was hosting a memorial with people playing strange instruments. One was a cross between an accordion and a harmonium from West Africa. Again, the mother wanted me to write about her daughter. I could feel the pressure emanating from her. But was she alive, dead, or about to be executed? Saw her on the floor of my elementary school and ran to her. Time is running out. It was like I was staring at a picture that would not come into focus. I wandered the barricaded city at night, trying to retrace the last moments of her life, hoping to finally understand why she did it. She was gone, but her hatred of me suffused the atmosphere of the whole city. The friends wanted a report. They knew she hated me and that I had no standing as a witness. The business, it didn't feel finished, but my plane was leaving soon. Said I would come back and finish my inquiry into why she did it. Why did I need to write it in money? Grief coins? What were they for? Collector's items. I had been given them accidentally as change because they looked like the real currency. Each coin was a golden word. dream, grief, my plants, they have no roots. Yet the pink peony blooms in the orange bucket, its stem magenta, a peony that contains the soul of the dead. I slide off a pyre into the water. Emily says, "You're not going to do it, are you?" The mother wants something from me. The dead. They're in the plants and the animals. Suddenly I live on a lake and have a pool. Should I get a kayak? In the dream I have ripped abs rather than quarantine flab. Where did these abs come from? A histrionic Kardashian lives next door, but sometimes she morphs into a Karen and I don't know if I should let her use my pool. I put my plants on my dock. My brother is staying with me, but the animal statues are suddenly animated, and the cows and the serpents are tramping and slithering through the house. They're in the air vents. So it is like Jumanji, featuring Robin Williams. Let's distract ourselves. Let's go for a swim. Then a camouflaged anaconda starts to languidly rise from the crown of the pool. Be still, brother. Metabolization of the corpse by the unconscious, from dreams of eating and kneading the corpse as Play-Doh to dreams of the soul's dispersal. Now the soul inhabits a mystical two-tone peony that grows without roots. When does grief turn to animism, I wonder? The unmoored souls drift in search of a body. Everything is terribly fecund. All objects have eyes, the way they do for children who believe that things have an ontological status. Dream. She disappeared into the water, someplace very remote. The mad hunt for the body. She had done it to spite us. She wants to know why. Why what? Are you looking? Shape-shifting between dead and alive, between sad and angry at us for destroying you by making you exist. There is a map in my mind of all the cold waters. I listen to the radio for clues about the location of the body. The radio anchors are discussing Gothic New Wave, the influence of Christian death. Why are you looking? So this last dream is for Eric. Where's Eric? Hi. So this is about our mutual poetry professor, Jory Graham, because I was having lots of dreams about Jory when I was worried about her health. Recurring dream, the teacher has died. All that's left behind, bereft students, chaos in the crumbling mall. Her silks, the knowledge she planted in us. I knew it was coming, but didn't know it would be so soon. The Grim Reaper takes an eraser to my life. One by one, the people are deleted from my memories. It's late or early, depending on your periodization of the day. How will I get home? It's the end of the world. I wish I could remember everything she taught me. Here's a paper with notes she wrote in red Sharpie. The husband rages. The management of her estate has been left to her tyrannical sister, who will be in charge of the posthumous books. In the dream, I was the least loved and least lyrical of the students. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. It was a beautiful reading. And thank you to Hannah, and thank you to everyone for being here. We've got one more event of the summer, the third of Alex Tatarsky's Rot Talks, titled Dirt, a Feast, and the readers will be Narendra Haynes, Precious Okoyaman, and Candace Thompson, so look for that. There are books for sale, and you're welcome to gather, again, in the plaza just outside of the gate in front of the church. Thank you all so much, and good night.